Okay, we're looking today at the topics of self-employment, Social Security, and income taxes for the minister. Okay, so all of these things are relevant to pastoral finances, and specifically they're relevant to American taxes. So if you don't plan to live in America, sorry, this won't directly relate to you. But if you do plan to be a pastor in the United States, then you're going to want to know this. All right, so let's talk about income tax. Just as a general category, income tax happens at the federal, state, and the local levels. Okay? And some states don't have income tax. Florida, where I grew up, did not have an income tax. Okay? So that's why a lot of people from the north, besides the weather difference, migrate to Florida, is they don't have to pay tax on income when they're drawing it out in their retirement to the state. They just have to pay tax on the federal level. Okay? So if you live in Ohio, in the city of Cincinnati, there's a 2.1% tax on your income. Both state and federal income tax levels are scaled. So let's just say that you were thinking about moving someplace to a city, for example, or a town. Part of your research, just for budgeting purposes, ought to be, are there any local income taxes in this locale? If so, I need to know that ahead of time so that I can plan for it. Does this state have income tax? What is its rate of income tax? How do the tax brackets get divided up? Of course, federal is not going to change without you knowing it. It's going to. Now, people handle income taxes basically three ways. There's self, there's online, and there's a CPA, certified professional accountant. So a lot of people who have simple incomes just submit their income tax themselves. They download an easy 10W40 or 1040, or there's the not quite so easy 1040 form. That's the basic federal income tax. And state and local always require you to have done federal before you can submit state and local. Okay? So state and local base their taxing of you off of your federal income tax statement. So you have to do that first. Online, I use taxcut.com. Other people use TurboTax. Okay, those are two of the most widely used. There are others. I started using TaxCut because it was free. And then TurboTax went free as well for your start. And what happens is both of these income tax programs start you out free, and the more complex your tax return becomes, the more you're going to have to pay at the end of the day. Okay? So if all you have is a W-2, okay, then it's going to be free, and you can submit it free. But if you have, let's say that you have a business besides your W-2, Okay? I have 3 businesses besides my W-2. I am a preacher, so my business is preaching. Okay? And I have to report income on that. I am a typesetter. I set the Reader's Hebrew Bible and for Zondervan Publishing Company, and so all the money I get from that publication comes under my typesetting business. Okay, you may be a painter, you may have lawn business, you may, who knows what other business you may have. So that's going to bump up the complexity. Then if you have investments, let's say you've got something in a mutual fund that has short-term returns, capital gains. Capital gains means that your actual capital that you have has increased. Okay, so let's say that they paid out revenue and your actual bottom line, not its supposed market paper value, but the actual bottom line amount of money you have has increased, and you're going to have to pay gains on that, tax on that capital gains, because that's income, right? They paid out $345 into this account, so you made $345. Never mind that you can lose it all tomorrow if everything goes south. You still have to pay tax on that capital gains. Okay? And then if you own property, and if you've purchased a house, or you have sold a house, I mean, pretty soon it just can become very complex. Most things can be handled if you keep good records by online submissions, and I've done that for the last 10 or so years. Okay? If you don't keep good records, you put all your receipts in a shoebox. At the end of the year, you hand your shoebox to your CPA. Okay, well, I pay this is free. Okay, online you're running from $0 through probably around $70. Okay, at the upper end of an online income tax program. With a CPA, I don't know for sure, but I suspect that it's in the 100 and up range, depending on the complexity. Does anybody use a CPA and pay less than $100 for your tax person's work? Nobody knows? Okay. So, I want as much of my tax return coming back to me as I possibly can. So my preference is to keep my costs as close to zero as possible. Okay. Is that making sense? Now, when you file income tax, if you are self-employed, okay, and self-employed is anything that you earn money from that's not on your W-2, then because the government requires employers to pay for Social Security, all right, what is Social Security? Well, Social Security is the United States government's plan to help you retire with some money, and they require every employer to deduct from your wages a certain percentage. I don't remember what it is right now. It may be around 7.5%. I can't remember, and it may even be variable depending on how much you make. I can't give you the details there, but that goes to the government, which immediately gets sucked into the deep black hole, and the government, has no actual money in the Social Security, so they're in debt to themselves, and but the thing is, they've been predicting the collapse of the Social Security program for 30 years. It hasn't collapsed yet. So I'm less fearful about collapse of Social Security than I was when those first predictions started being made. Doesn't mean that it won't. I mean, we keep running up trillions of dollars of national debt. A Great Depression could happen. But if the government goes bankrupt, there's so many other things that are going to be bad at the same time that that may not be the greatest worry we have is the government going bankrupt. All right, so here's the point. Because you're self-employed, you didn't pay Social Security tax. So now they're going to hit you. You're going to have to be taxed on whatever you made to pay into Social Security because you're self-employed. All right? So it's not just income tax, it's also, that's separate from. Income tax and Social Security tax are not the same thing, completely separate. All right? Now, for a pastor is almost always considered self-employed. Okay? He's not considered an employee of the church. Now, there are some large churches where that's not the case, but in any church inside of our tradition, anything probably under 100, that's going to be the case. And so that means then that as a pastor, everything that you get paid is going to be hit both on income tax and on Social Security. Now, what do we do about this? Well, you want to have a conversation with the church leadership, whether it's the board of stewards or the board or the finance committee. Every church does things differently. And talk about how does the church want to handle this. There are options. Option is you get all the money and it's all up to you to make sure you save enough so that by the end of the year you can pay your income tax and Social Security. Okay. Option number 2 is the church pays Social Security for the pastor. Okay? They get it calculated, and part of his package is they calculate the tax on the income they're paying him, and they pay that as well. So it's as though he's getting his income, but he doesn't ever have to pay the Social Security out himself. All right? And that can be in, percentage ratios. They pay 20, 25, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 75, 90%, it just depends on what the church is able. You can have a sliding scale from 0% all the way up to 100%. Okay? If you don't ask about it, it comes back and bites you in the backside because in April suddenly your taxes are due, and if they haven't paid your Social Security, then you're out all this money. Now, let me just show you. Has anybody ever filled out a Schedule C on your income taxes? All right, so I'll show you my federal income tax so that you can see what TurboTax does for me. Okay, I'll go back a few years here and I'll grab it after I published the book. It might need to be 2000. So mine got complicated when I published a book and was getting royalties off of that book. Okay, so not only was I preaching, now I was typesetting. And, now my wife works as a consultant for this place, and so she's got a business, and she sells books on eBay. That's another business, and all these. She babysat kids for a while, and that was a business. And she sold eggs. She had, and if you make over $600 or $650 now, it's counted as a taxable business. Okay, so you need to keep track of, let's see here. Here's the federal return. Okay, so you got to turn this on so you can see this. By 2009, I had 3 kids. Okay, and the way the tax code is written right now, you can you get tax credit for every dependent that you have. Okay, so the more kids you have, the more tax credit you get. Okay, so that's why the government wants to know what your kids' names are and their social security numbers. Okay, so in this year I had $23,000 basically in wages, tips, W-2 form. I had $17,000 in business income. Okay, and that gave me a total income of $41,000. Now, look at this right here. 1/2 of self-employment tax. Well, that's $17,000 that I made by preaching, by publishing a book, by whatever other businesses were going on at that point. I had to pay social self-employment tax on that. And that comes under a, let's scroll down here, Schedule A. No, it's not Schedule A. Well, this was medical and dental experiences, taxes I had to pay, gifts to charity, so I had given $11,000 that year on Schedule A. But Schedule C is where we get profit or loss from a business. And so for my typesetting business, $15,000 had come in that year. And then for my preaching, I'd made about $2,500 in preaching that year. And they're keeping track of all these, where their expenses associated with it. Mary Ann was baking cakes at that point. She had $1,500 in cake baking. Okay. And then here's the self-employment tax. If you had net earnings from self-employment or other than church employee income, okay, so church employee income is a special category, and you have to go to a special place to do that, of $400 or more. That was back in 2009. Okay. If you had a church employee income of $108 or more, income from services you performed as a minister or as a member of a religious order is not church employee. See, so I'm not a church employee. I'm a preacher who gets contracted to preach at camp meetings in various places, revival services. So that I don't count that as a church employee income. Then I have to file this. And it's extremely complicated, which is why I'm very happy to have Tax Cut or TurboTax run this, answer all the yes/no questions, run it through. But at the end of the day, look, what I owed on self-employment tax was $2,400. All right? Now that's a lot of money. Okay. So half of that self-employee tax is actually what's going to get charged to me. Okay, and when we go back up here to this adjusted gross income, they knock out of my income half of that. So they say you don't have to report half of that self-employment tax. Okay, but you're going to be charged the other part. So when it comes down to deductions, here at the end, other taxes, I had $2,486 of self-employment tax that showed up on the line. Okay, so my total tax bill was going to be $2,486. But then, with my earned income credit, based on the number of qualifying children I had, and the additional child tax credit I had, and federal income tax withheld from my W-2, I had actually supposedly paid out $5,000 in taxes. Okay, which meant then that the government owed me $2,500 instead of me owing them. Woohoo! Okay, that's what you want to see at the end of your tax form, that you're owed, not that you owe. Okay. Now, the state counts things a little differently. And sometimes I owed state taxes when I was getting money back from the federal government. In part because, for example, Ohio has a use tax, which means that if you buy anything online and don't pay taxes for it, at the end of the year, you have to go back, calculate how much you spent online, and pay taxes for it. So don't think you're getting out of paying taxes by buying online if you're going to be honest. Be a person of integrity. All right? So, now, kind of merging into my next lecture. Let me pause. Any questions about what I'm showing you here? Anything that you don't understand or would like further explanation on? You may file with the government to say that you want to opt out of the Social Security program. That is, you're going to take care of your own retirement, and the reason you're opting out is that you have a conscientious objection. Okay? So you have to have a reason of conscience why you can't participate in the government's. You say, well, what reason of conscience could somebody have? Well, let's say that you believe that you're supposed to be a good steward. You think the government's a bad steward, and so you can't in good conscience trust the government to steward your money. You got to have it to... Okay, so, I mean, I think that's possible. You think the government... If you think it's going to go bankrupt and you're not going to get anything out of it, then putting your money in is a bad idea. That's certainly bad stewardship. Okay, but you have to, in good conscience, be able to say, I have a conscientious objection to opt out of Social Security. All right. Now, you can opt out for ministerial wages, but you cannot opt out for non-ministerial wages. They don't care about your conscience when it comes to working for somebody else. Okay, you're in the Social Security program whether you like it or not. All right. So if you ever work a job where you get a W-2, some money has been paid into the Social Security program for you. And you can actually go online. Has anybody ever done this? Yes? No? Okay, so let me show you this. Social Security, government, my account, that'd be right. So if you go to ssa.gov, okay, you can go to the My Social Security, and so right here they tell me that over here I can look at my earnings record. Okay, so back in 1989 when I was a senior in high school, I had a reported earnings of $1,245. Okay, then I went to when I was in college, I earned $1,400 one year, $189, $143, $172. Okay, then I went to Bob Jones, and my earnings started to increase a little bit, right? Until the point when I was working 30 and 40 hours, then I'm making $13,000 a year, about $1,000. And then I came to GBS here, and I went from 13 to 14. Okay, and then things bumped up in 2005. Okay, so you can see what your earnings have been over time, and then you can, I was fortunate that in 2004, that jump in 2005 was when I published the Reader's Hebrew Bible, and that became the equivalent of a second job for me. Okay, it was bringing in about as much money as working part-time somewhere else would have brought in for me, and I just said thank the Lord that He provided that opportunity. Okay, so what it's showing me here is that if I retired at age 67, the Social Security program would be paying me about $1,627 a month. Okay, all right, so estimated benefits, you can look at this, and it gives you information about if you become disqualified. If I somehow became a quadriplegic, I'd be getting $1,300 a month. If I died, my child would get $1,000 a month. My spouse would get the same amount if she was caring for the child, and my spouse, starting at full retirement age, would get some of my benefits. Okay, so there's information there on how Social Security works. Go to ssa.gov and you can look that stuff up. Any questions about that? It's like this is a one and done. You opt out, you're out forever. Okay? So there was a period of time within the last 5 years that they kind of opened the window for ministers to come back inside the system who had opted out in the past. Whether that window is still open in general, I don't know for sure. I'd have to research. But historically, the program has been, if you're out, you're out. Okay? So, I haven't opted out in part because I'm not a full-time minister and most of my earnings came through W-2s. But, I'll be happy for the government to give me $1,600 a month. Based on my earnings. Am I counting on them to float my boat when I retire? No, not a chance. I'm working on my own retirement plan. Right. Okay. Now, an additional benefit of being ordained is what's called housing allowance. Okay. Now, I freely admit that I'm not a certified public accountant. I am not studied. I have no academic study background in finances, and so the depth of my knowledge is fairly shallow. It just happens that the depth of my knowledge is greater than the depth of your knowledge. Okay? You've never heard of any of this stuff, so if you know more than me on one of these points, that's great, Speak up and share the knowledge. Okay? But housing allowance says, okay, it's also called a parsonage allowance. Same thing, parsonage allowance. This allows a church or a denomination to designate a portion of your income. So let's say that they're going to pay you $40,000. You got a phenomenal group of people. They know your value. They're going to pay you $40,000 a year. Okay. They can say, well, in order for the pastor to entertain, furnish, maintain, and perhaps even supply housing, maybe they don't actually have a parsonage, either you're renting or you're buying, we're going to designate up to a X percentage of the income as housing allowance. Okay. And that can range from 0 to 100%. Okay. Okay. Now, the government's going to look askance at somebody designating 100% of their income as a parsonage allowance because they know that it's unlikely that it costs everything that you have to supply yourself a parsonage. Okay, so it's more common to do something like 70%. Now, here's what that doesn't mean. It doesn't mean that 70% of your income no longer counts as income. What it does mean is that up to 70% of your income can be demonstrated through receipts to have been spent for the supply, support, maintenance of a parsonage, and therefore everything that was spent for parsonage supply doesn't count as income and does not have to be reported under income tax. Okay? Are you with me? Okay, so just give you an example. A pastor I know went to the church board, said, I would like to have you designate 50% of my income to housing allowance. And there's a written document. It goes into the board's minutes. Okay, because if the IRS ever comes after you to audit you, you can't be making this stuff up. There's got to be a paper trail that supports it. Okay, so the IRS is going to say, where are the church board minutes in which they agreed officially to designate so much of your income? Right? We've got that. And then there's a page that they give to you that's signed by the treasurer or whoever is, the church board chairman or whoever's in charge. And you can supply that to the IRS and say, okay, we're buying a house. The church does not provide us a parsonage. And our monthly mortgage payment was $450. Okay? In order to supply and maintain the house in terms of upkeep, paper towels, toilet paper, everything that goes in, waxing the floors, cleaning the floors, everything that goes into maintaining that property. We spent another $400 a month in maintenance, and we entertained people. So we were buying food specifically as part of our ministry. We had another $200 a month in entertainment costs. You have a lot of people over, or you buy expensive food for the people when you have them over. Okay, so actually that's probably not too much. If you really do much entertaining, you could easily spend $200 a month. Okay, so that is $400, $850, $1,050 times 12 is $12,600. Okay, so when you're working on your income tax, and let's say you've got $40,000, you're going to say, well, actually, I'm going to subtract $12,600 from $40,000, and my income was only $28,400. Why? Because this was designated as housing allowance. Now, that's not 50% of your income. You were designated 50%. Okay? So this number could have been as high as 20, but here's the thing. What happens if one year you spent $25,000 in housing, but the church is only designated 50? Oh, too bad, so sad, you're out $5,000. Why? Well, because that's over the designated percentage, which is why it's best to set it as high as you think it could ever possibly go. Yeah, we'll never hit that ceiling, but if we did hit that ceiling, for some unforeseen reason, the ceiling's high enough to accommodate what we would spend. You with me? Okay. Now, $40,000 versus $28,000 is going to make a significant difference in your tax liability at the end of the year. Okay. My understanding at this point is, unfortunately, that housing allowance designation does not address Social Security tax. So they're going to tax you on the $40,000 for Social Security purposes, but for income tax, they're only going to tax you on the $28,000. Okay. Now, I'd be happy to be corrected about that, but that's my understanding. So if you say, I don't have a good head for numbers, I'm not a detail-oriented person, and because I'm not detail-oriented, keeping track of receipts and running budgets, and my wife doesn't happen to be a detail-oriented person either, all right, well then you're going to want to get a good CPA, Certified Public Accountant, who will help you navigate this. And you want to get somebody specifically who knows about church taxes. Don't just grab any CPA, because any old CPA doesn't know about church taxes. Okay? Jim Olson is one of the most commonly used. Bob Bedford's another commonly used CPA. I'm sure both of those men are getting up in age, up in years, and they probably won't be in business much beyond 10 to 15 years more than right now. So you just want to be aware of that in the future. Now, I have a guide here that I want to show you about. It's called Worth's Guide, Tax Guide for Ministers. Okay, the Income Tax Guide for Ministers. And if we go to worthfinancial.com, there is an entire website that has been providing ministers with the most user-friendly minister's tax guide for 44 years. It's registered with the National Association of State Boards. They have seminars, and they have right now ready a 2018 edition for preparing your 2017 taxes. Okay? And every question that ministers have to ask is answered in this Worth's Income Tax Guide for Ministers. So, if you're doing it yourself, or you're doing it online, but you're not sure that the online program has enough smarts about what ministers need to do, then the best thing is for you to get yourself this income tax guide and figure out what you need to do. They also have a 1-hour CD on the minister's compensation package, in which they help you learn about what are all the possible components that could be stacked into the package. Okay, there are things that the church can do that don't actually cost the church any money, just like designating housing allowance costs the church nothing, zero, but can save you big time. Okay, but if the church is, so for example, my parents went to work for a ministry where the treasurer at the ministry had no experience with ministerial taxes. And when they asked the treasurer to designate their portion of their income as housing allowance, they refused. Why? Well, in his mind, this was going to be a huge tax liability to the church. Okay, it's not right. It's going to come back on the church. The IRS will come after us. And it didn't matter that my parents were able to provide all of the IRS forms and guidelines. The person was way too scared. So what they did is that rather than I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. No problem. Thank you for listening. You tried, but that doesn't work. They went back to the denomination and had the denomination handle this. The denomination that had ordained my father, there was a way for the denomination to handle it in designating his work as a form of ministry and then designating the housing allowance. And that made a huge impact on my parents' sustainability. So I'm getting ready, Lord willing, to move off campus next summer. My parents are giving me their old house. You know what that means? Property taxes, house insurance. Okay, suddenly I'm going to incur probably $3,000 to $5,000 additional dollars annually in bills that I don't have because my housing is provided to me here. In anticipation of that, I've had the church where my membership is located designate 70% of my GBS income as a parsonage allowance, because this is where the denomination I'm a part of stations me. I'm stationed at God's Bible School. So I am a officially sanctioned minister doing ministry under the auspices of the denomination, and thus my church can designate my income for parsonage allowance. So all of those housing costs I'm going to be able to write off for tax purposes. Okay? As always, tax laws change all the time. So what I'm saying right now, by the time you're actually being hired by a church, may not be true. Okay? But you at least know questions to ask. Okay? Concepts to check on. Right? They also have a tax seminar, a whole seminar. If you You know, that's the kind of thing that I would say to someone like John Parker, who's the conference president for the Alabama. What if the conference paid $109 and then brought all of its ministers in for the Worth's tax seminar? If everybody paid $10, $5, all the ministers, I mean, there's 100 people on the roll in Alabama. So if everybody paid $1, okay, we could all benefit from this tax seminar, and no one person would have to, you know, that kind of a thing.